It's that time of the month again, and I'm here to share with you my top 5 favorite records for the month of May. As always, I'm going to go through chronological order of release, but by the way, this month there's going to be a little bit of a surprise at the end. Now, let's start off with Fire Schwann's Warriors, out May 3rd on Napalm Records. This is the band's 13th studio album. They are a folk metal band, and this is their first ever all-English record. Not necessarily a brand new album per se, because it's more of a compilation of songs that were taken out of the last couple of records, but now translated into English and all packaged together under one single umbrella. But I love this record. I love the sound. I love the English lyrics. I think it works phenomenally well for them, even though I'm a big fan of their original material in German, because I always connect more with folk bands that have their own native tongue as part of their music, as part of their sound. I think you get more out of bands like that, and these guys are definitely one of those bands that falls under that category. And surprisingly, this album was very entertaining. I honestly came in expecting the songs to maybe be a little bit flat, to not live up to the expectations, to not live up to the originals, but they did. It was a lot of fun to listen to this record. It's one of those albums that you just can't get enough of it. I love the cameos. I love the added musicians that they invited to come on the record. Francisco from Windrose, Chris Harms from Lord of the Lost. I honestly felt like this album was so well put together. It was not just a compilation, was not just their first record all in English. It was a lot more than that. It really feels like a brand new full-length album, and because of that, and because of the playability that it has, it made it into my top 5 albums of the month. Next, we have Unleash the Archers with Phantoma, out May 10th on Napalm Records. This is the band's 6th studio album. They are a power metal band, and now this one may surprise some of you because from what I'm reading in the comments, this album doesn't rank as high as the previous 2 albums. Now, while I can understand that thought process and I can understand where some of the fans are coming from, and I can see how the last 2 records were phenomenal albums all around. After all, they won a Juno with one of those albums. So they've definitely been doing a lot of great work with previous records. But for me, this album, from a pure concept standpoint, because that's how I'm analyzing this record, it works a lot better than the previous 2. The previous 2 was strong musically, strong vocally, strong lyrically, but a little bit harder to digest as far as the concept is concerned. If you're trying to follow the story, if you're trying to follow what's going on, those albums felt a little bit short on that, even though musically and vocally they were outstanding. I felt this album streamlined the songs a little bit more, and the lyrical content and the concept and the storytelling aspect definitely came up and raised the bar. And it was an album that was easier to follow because of that. And when you have an album that from a concept perspective is easy to follow, you're able to connect with the story that it's being told. And that's a huge part of any concept. And the sound on this album works well. It works well with the concept, works well with the storytelling, it works well with what they're trying to deliver. And I felt that the main ingredients of who Unleash the Archers are all about is still present in this record. It's just that they took a quite different approach and created a sound that perhaps resonates much better, not just with the storytelling, but with the story itself. Next, we have A Rotting Christ with Pro Christo, out May 24th on Season of Mist. This is the band's 14th studio record. They are a black metal band, an iconic black metal band. And this is an album that definitely resonated with me. Now, it's not as dark as some of the previous records from Rotting Christ. It's an album that has a little bit more of a soundtrack feel to it, and therefore becomes a little bit more open. It breathes better. It has a little bit more clarity in it. You can still find dark elements from start to end on this album, either on the lyrics, on the way the vocals come across, and some elements of the sound, but it's definitely overall a much brighter sounding album, a more open, warm soundtrack style score sounding record, heavily atmospheric as you would expect, but still a great record nevertheless by Rotting Christ. A different side of the same coin, if you will, as far as the band is concerned, shifting in terms of what the essence of the record is all about, continuing with that deep atmospheric prospects in terms of how they create songs, but changing a little bit of the underlining of it, creating that more brighter sound, that more open sound, and that is definitely something different, something new from Rotting Christ that sets this album, or at least helps sets this album apart from its predecessors. And because of that, I connected with it, and I really enjoyed the experience. I don't want necessarily every album to sound the same, even though this album strays true to the DNA of Rotting Christ, but it definitely offers a different perspective that I wasn't expecting coming in. Next, we have Relica with Secrets of the Future, out May 31st on Nuclear Blast. This is the band's first record. They're a progressive metalcore band, and this is a really strong record all around. Obviously, they've released other material before this album, and maybe that helped them get to a point where they can create an album that feels quite cohesive, even though it's very diverse. This album has a lot of diversity built into it. Part of their sound, part of their DNA comes with that diversity, but it's an album that has a lot of quality from top to bottom. Really well produced, really well put together, having a clear and clean sound all the way through, and allowing the diversity and the influences that diverse the band impact the songs in a positive way, while keeping the tracks somewhat connected with one another, and allowing these very different songs to coexist perfectly under one roof, under one umbrella. Last, maybe last, but definitely not least, Witherfall, Sounds of the Forgotten, out May 31st on Deathwave Records. This is the band's fourth studio album. They are a heavy metal band, and this is my favorite Witherfall album to date. It's a perfect record from my point of view. It's an album that you get the most vocally out of any record that they've ever released, and I think you get the most musically, because while still being very textured, while still being very layered, very worked on, if you will, it comes across a little bit more streamlined. It comes across a little bit more simplified. And when you have songs that are a little bit straighter to the point, a little bit quicker to the point, the overall album resonates with the listener a lot more. It becomes easier to digest, easier to listen to, easy to connect with. And when you get to the end of the record, you don't necessarily feel like that it was a long path, it was a long journey. No, this album really feels shortened, and on one hand because of the quality of the material, and then they felt I feel like they created a way, or they felt maybe the need to create an album that has a lot of ebbs and flows, that has a really well-defined roller coaster ride approach from first to last song, including some interlude tracks extends the record. It gives a little bit more of extension to the album, but it doesn't make the album feel longer. It just makes the album feel more complete. An old school sounding record, but not necessarily sounding old school, but a record that also in its design has old school elements to it. When you look at albums like Iron Maiden old school records from the 80s, King Diamond, bands like Queen, for example, I think you're going to find a lot of similarities in terms of the ebbs and flows that this album has, in terms of that diversity that it offers, and still how it finds a way of connecting these songs and making the overall experience of listening to the album very balanced and very fluid at the exact same time. I honestly enjoy this album tremendously. Like I said, my favorite record by Witherfall to date. Now, the caveat with this top 5 albums of the month is Pain, I Am. I honestly tried to squeeze this album in this top 5 list. I even thought about taking Feuerschwanz out because it's more of a compilation album than a brand new record. But I definitely want to give a shout out to Pain, I Am. I think it's a phenomenal album all around. Great sound, great vocals, great production. The drums sound phenomenal. The guitars are really impactful. Industrial, but not full-on industrial across every single song, with a lot of different DNAs present on that record, a lot of different sonic fingerprints from song to song. A very diverse album as well, an album that really stands out as a quality record by Pain. I Am out right now, and definitely in my top albums, maybe not in my top 5, but in my top albums for the month of May. So this time around, I did 6. This is it, guys. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts on your top 5 albums or on your top 10, whatever top you have. Albums for the month of May. Hit me up in the discussion on this video in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.